Hey, educators. So today we're going to be talking about drilling skills. We're talking 21st century skills, content-based skills, and even reading skills.
And if you're not familiar with a skill is just basically something that you eventually get good at as you continue to practice it.
Yes. All right. So I am Miss B, an English teacher for ninth grade scholars.
Hi, I'm Miss G. I'm a social studies teacher for ninth, 10th, and 11th grade scholars.
And this is Teacher Life, a toolbox of tips and tricks so that you can have a great school year.
Okay, educators, let us talk about skills. All right. And so educators, I'm sure many of you are aware of what skills are, and skills are basically one's ability to do something, right? And so when we're dealing with learners, we are basically trying to develop their expertise in whatever we're teaching them. And a couple of weeks ago, we tapped into some of the necessary skills for adulting, right? As kids are rushing to do, but when they get there, they'll be like, oh no, no more adulting for me. And so a lot of those skills help them to function in the workforce and in their adult life. And so we tapped into some of those skills, but today we're going to talk a little bit more about how those skills play out in the classroom. All right, so why are skills important? And as we all know, skills are important. And again, this is getting redundant in terms of helping kids to be successful in their adult life. You know, whether it is they go into higher education or if they go into the work world or the professional world, these skills help them to be successful.
And I also think definitely in their personal life, a lot of these skills will translate into day-to-day activities that adults need to take care of.
Agreed. Agreed. Okay, so when we're developing knowledge and skills, they're like two forces coming together, right? So a learner will come into the classroom with this raw talent and ability, right? And they have not necessarily, learned to manage it. But where educators come in is that we train them in how to manage these talents and abilities, and we practice over and over again, hence drilling the skill. Someone once said repetition is the mother of skill. And I don't know who said it, but when I was in karate, that's what my karate instructor used to say every time he would kick me to the side. Repetition is the mother of skill. So when kids come in with their talent and ability, teachers train them and we train them and practice over and over again until these skills are drilled into their heads.
Can we talk about that practice for a little bit?
Absolutely.
So when I'm thinking about when we're giving scholars practice on a particular skill, we want to have some sort of mastery number. And so in our classroom, when we're practicing the different reading skills in ninth grade English, our mastery number is 80. So when we give that first pre-assessment on whatever the skill is, the scholars that get that 80% are able to move on to maybe another skill or another activity. And then we drill down with the scholars who didn't get that mastery number of 80 by providing more practice.
Awesome. I think I'll try that. Awesome. So educators, what do skills look like in the classroom? All right, and so I have brought up for you here a sample standard that I use in social studies. All right, but before I go to the standard, if we think about the 21st century skills, some of these skills that are embedded in our standards play into information literacy. We talked about it prior when we talked about unit plans. When you're deconstructing standards, you'll see these skills. But more importantly, they're embedded in your instructional standard. So here is a sample standard from social studies that says describe the diverse characteristics of societies in Central and South America. So for me in social studies, I have to figure out, do learners know how to describe? Do they know how to explain? So if you look at the substandard, it talks about the rise and fall of the Maya, Inca, and Aztecs. Do they know how to compare and contrast, right? And so those are some of these skills that play into some of the 21st century skills, namely critical thinking skills, right? So when they're looking at societies, can they look at society and be able to describe what's going on, to explain what's going on, to compare and contrast different societies? And so fortunately for us, and it doesn't apply to all curriculum, our social studies curriculum comes with these information processing skills. It says to the teacher, and these are attached to the standards, you know, these are some of the skills that your learners should be developing over the course of from kindergarten to 12th grade. And so if you look at the different colors and the different letters, you know, you can see in kindergarten, certain skills are supposed to be introduced, you know, comparing similarities and differences. You know, at a certain grade, these skills should be developed. And at a certain grade, which it looks like middle school, certain skills should be mastered. And so really when they get to 8th grade, 9th grade, high school, they should really be applying these skills. And as an educator, that's not always the case when kids come into class. So these, for me, these information processing skills, you know, when I'm testing kids or, you know, I might give them a pre-assessment, I'm trying to see what level of these skills they're demonstrating.
Right. And I like that idea of using such a matrix, because when I was speaking earlier of having that mastery number, that 80%, I think the next step would be to have an application activity for those scholars that do get the 80 because they've mastered the skill. And so the next activity that the 80% and above scholars would do would be applying that skill. And so that's pretty cool. I like this.
Agreed, agreed. Because they could be working on definitely, if you're talking about the hierarchy matrix with knowledge, skills, synthesis, they could be doing just like more depth of knowledge assignments.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so an important component of assessing and teaching skills are alignment. And so how this shows up in the classroom is through targeted textbook examples or targeted instructional strategies, right? And so in my classroom, let's say we're going to stay with this same standard, you know, we get a textbook, we get all these resources that come with it. Then as an educator, I have to go through this material and see what lines up with what the standard is asking. And you can do it in many ways. So this is a small example of, say, a skill builder that's in our textbook. So let's say this standard is asking us to describe, and we're working on the substandard where it says compare Mayan, Aztec, and Inca societies. So we've basically gone through the standard. We've sort of gotten some background information, and now we're familiar with all three of these societies. Then we're comparing. So the one skill I might be working on is comparing. So I might assign a opener activity, you know, as one of these skill builders in the textbook. And I will assign them question 2 because that's the focus, right? Or within the same textbook, there are reading questions. So I might assign all the reading questions that's associated with comparing. And so that is one way that I would remain focused target that skill and stay aligned with content and the skill I'm focusing on for the week.
And we do the same thing in English. So say if the standard is talking about looking at theme, part of that standard is making inferences. And so in our textbook, we have a whole section where they have short passages that are only focused on reading the passage and making inferences. And they have 2 or 3 of them. And then at some point, a couple of the activities get to that application part that we were talking about earlier. So the textbook is a great source for drilling skills.
Definitely, definitely. Okay. Another skill that's associated with social studies are mapping and global skills. And as you can see, we have another matrix here. And it's sort of the same idea. And so for me, as a social studies teacher that fortunately have these attached to my standards, then I can plan, so my opener might be an information processing skill if I'm focusing on comparing and contrasting. And my closer might be a map skill with the same idea of using it to assess, seeing what they can do. And as we progress forward, then I change the levels, of what I'm doing. So if they're familiar with, using a compass rose, then I might move on to the next. And then maybe if there's a few that do not know, I might assign it for homework, or I might do a small group. And so as an opener and as a closer, I'm constantly working with kids, on these skills.
Same in our English classroom. We look at if it's the inference skill, we did the assessment. Those who mastered move on to an application inference. And then by the end of the lesson, we come back to the that inference skill in our closing.
And this is what just sort of targeting that map skill and making sure it's aligned or correlating with that original standard might look like. And again, there are certain resources that come with our textbook. So back in the day, used to be a slide, like a slide film, and we used to put it on a projector. But fortunately today, it will come in an electronic format, and then I might put this on the board as a closer, right? Or it might be a map in the map skill in the book. But again, it's aligned with Mesoamerica. We're looking at the tribes that we were studying, and then we're assessing some sort of geographical skill here, still working with maps, but it's important that it correlates because it helps kids overall when you are teaching skills, and it helps educators to remain focused on content.
And would this be this looks like an application area where you are now applying that skill?
Yes. Yes. So this would be application because when they come in, I'm giving them little assessments and, can you read a map? If you can, I might teach a lesson, but this is definitely application. Okay, so again, in line, I always say for social studies and for the course I teach, because again, I feel so lucky because I talk to some other teachers when we try to sort of collab and do something cross curriculum just to find out that they don't have these and they have to deconstruct standards, which we'll be looking at in a future video. But in any case, just as a map of what my classroom would look like. So if I have a 3-part lesson, right, I might have my opener for that day to be an information processing skill, right? Then I will deliver content-based instructional strategies. And we talked about instructional strategies in one of our videos. So however that is delivered, content-based, and then I might be closing with a map skills assignment, content-based, right? So all throughout the lesson, the student is getting content, getting skills associated with content, and hopefully, it is, they're learning this material. And basically, this is what I consider just drilling the skills. So over and over again, they're seeing that skill in hopes that they're learning this material and taking in the skill.
What we decided to do this year, instead of using that 3-part lesson to drill the skill, we kind of thought about what are 4 or 5 things that we want our 9th grade English scholars to leave the course with. And we developed a weekly lesson plan. A weekly bell ringer activity that does address 1 skill per day. And over the course of our 18 weeks, they would have mastered the 5 different skills. So we're looking at being able to correct errors in writing, because it's English. That's one thing we do. We go back through the writing process. And so one of those bell ringers has the kids working on that skill. And then we have another skill based bell ringer where we have scholars looking at a quote and responding to it in a very short writing piece where we perfect the race writing strategy. So over those 18 weeks, when they're leaving, they got that writing strategy definitely mastered.
Awesome. I always smile when I hear the race strategy and
I
the age
love that.
strategy. Just simply because, kids are like, that's a lot. How are we going to learn that? And it's just always nice to have a strategy and say, look, you can do it, and this is how we're going to do it.
And it's a skill, because that writing piece is definitely needed outside of the classroom in our real world living.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. All right. And so you just tapped on something that we also do in social studies when we're drilling the skill. On a classroom level, I definitely do it on a daily basis. And in my information processing skills matrix, it runs 17 skills. In the map matrix, it runs 12. So, we go for 18 weeks. So fortunately for me, I am able to do 1 skill per week. So I might stand compare and contrasting all week long. And so we end, and then by the time we get to week 18, we would be reaching that last skill. So it's definitely, I've definitely had luck with it, but I've had the experience of experiencing skills like this on a school-wide basis. When I was in the master's program and I was doing my internship as a high school teacher, there was a principal there that did it school-wide. And she dealt with a school that had a lot of English as a second language learners. And I think on Wednesdays, the entire school had to do 1 skill, whether it's analyzing political cartoons, interpreting charts, and they did that every week the entire year. And I think it was when they had like the high school graduation test or something like that. And all these kids, she had a high success rate with this skills program, doing it all year long and stopping the entire school. And all the teachers in the school had to be working on the same skill for their specific, curriculum.
That's such a great idea.
It was very successful. Kids were successful on the test. Even kids, a lot of kids said, English was not their first language. All right. And so this is just something I threw in here in terms of, again, I sound like a skilled mad person, but
you guys, Miss loves her skills, I'm telling you.
Even in the classroom as we do assignments, this was a reading, like you said, on Columbus and on, I think we were looking at Mesoamerica prior to European incursion. And, you know, as we rolled up on Europeans coming to the Americas, we had a reading in Columbus, and I choose these, you know, based on skills. Draw conclusions, you know, in reading excerpts. When we do DBQs, I search for anything that aligns with that skill that I'm teaching, you know, whether we're analyzing primary sources. And then I use language. You know, if we're having a group discussion, I'll say, well, let's draw some inferences. Let's compare and contrast. And then when we're collaborating, questions are skill-based, you know.
Yes.
So teachers, educators can work it into their lessons. You just look through your resources and choose based on that skill. Okay, educators. Last but not least are social emotional learning skills, right?
Yes.
And so as educators, we, you know, direct instruction and we facilitate learning, but a child must come to school and be ready to learn, right? And so it depends on what they have going on internally, emotionally, and all those components play a role in whether a child can take in instruction that we're delivering, right? It plays a role in their whole educational experience.
Because like you always say, we're teaching the whole child.
Many of you may be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So when we're thinking about social emotional learning, we know that as human beings, we all have these basic needs that must be met for us to just even feel comfortable in this world, right? And those are the physiological needs and the safety needs, but also just as important are psychological needs. And so we know that when learners come into school, and they may be having some of these psychologically neat challenges in these areas, then they can't do their best when we're in the classroom.
All right, so here goes some skills and resources. Don't forget you have your textbooks. You have resource books that are content specific. Always remember that media center. You got your electronic and other resources, online sources from educational sites, and your favorite YouTubers like me and Miss G. What would you like to add?
Well, I would like to add that a lot of the things you need, you already have. On a year-to-year basis, there are all these new things that come in, and they're always telling you, try this, try that, you know, or when they come in to evaluate us, when administrators come in to evaluate us, they're always looking for pizzazz. I sometimes feel, how are you engaging? What are they doing? You know, but for me, I think about kids moving forward, maybe to higher education, maybe, you know, to the workplace. And definitely critical thinking skills are necessary. Definitely social emotional skills are necessary. But I think all those things can be taught by the educator with simple, basic resources. You don't need big pizzazz. If you're teaching content, you find your content, you find your resources, you match your skills, and then you deliver them to the learner, then you assess, and then you reteach and, you know, fill the need so that kids are getting skills. And, you know, all the flashing lights and all the things they want you to do in the classroom, yeah, that's nice. But skills are important so that, you know, we know learners are leaving us and they'll be able to function in the world after they leave school.
I agree. I agree. Back to basics.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Well, all right, educators. We hope that this information was helpful. And if it was, please subscribe to our channel. Hit the comment. No, don't do that. Hit the notification bell so that you will be notified when we do upload future videos.
and educators, we'd like for you to share some of your favorite skills that you use in your classroom in the comment section. Thank you very much and enjoy your teacher life.